Pull out your phone right now. Open your 401k, your retirement account, whatever you've got. Find the section called Fees, or look up the expense ratio on the fund you're currently invested in. That number, whatever it says, gets charged to your balance every single year. Up years, down years, crash years when you were losing sleep watching your account drop. The people who put that number there, they made money in every single one of those years. If you see anything above 0.2%, and if you're sitting in a default employer plan, I'd bet you will. You're currently inside one of the most perfectly designed, perfectly legal wealth transfer systems ever built. Almost nobody explains this to you when you sign the paperwork. Look, I know what the standard retirement conversation sounds like. You're behind? Save more. Earn more. Start earlier. Pick better investments. And sure, all of that has some truth to it. But none of it explains why two people, same salary, same contribution rate, same 40-year timeline, can end up with retirement accounts that are $400,000 apart. That gap isn't talent, isn't timing, isn't market intuition. It's one number, buried in enrollment documents most people click through in under 3 minutes on their first day of work, that's been quietly running on their money ever since. Here's what makes this trap so clean. Nobody lies to you. The number is disclosed. It's in the documents. It's technically available to anyone who looks. But almost no one does, because almost no one explains what that number compounds into across 40 years. They call it a management fee. Let me translate that for you. A management fee is the fee for getting expertly managed out of roughly a third of your final retirement balance. Let me be more precise about what that actually is. Formally, a percentage of your fund's assets, deducted annually to cover operating costs, disclosed in the fund prospectus. In actual language, a yearly charge that comes out of your balance automatically, that you never see as a clean line item on your statement, for a service you were enrolled in without anyone explaining what it would cost you by the time you retire. The official term is expense ratio, and 1% of it, just 1%, can silently erase close to 30% of what you'd otherwise retire with. Silently, legally. Every year, whether anyone in that fund did anything useful or not. Let me show you how the math actually works. Meet Marcus, 26 years old, first real job, real salary, real 401k. He's doing everything right, contributing 15% of his pay, capturing his full employer match, leaving it alone to grow. Textbook responsible. His plan defaults him into an actively managed mutual fund. Expense ratio, 1.2% per year. 1.2%. A team of actual professionals, analysts, Bloomberg terminals, MBAs from schools Marcus's family couldn't afford, actively managing his retirement portfolio. Seems reasonable. You're paying for expertise, right? Here's what Marcus is actually paying for. Say he contributes $300,000 total across his career. Spread over 40 years, that's a pretty modest monthly number. With historical average annual returns of roughly 7%, that's approximately the long-run historical return of broad market indices. Not a guarantee, not a promise, just what the data shows across long periods. Marcus should build to approximately $1.6 million by retirement. $1.6 million. That's the target he's working toward every paycheck. Now watch what the fee does to that number. The expense ratio doesn't come out of the fund manager's cut. It comes directly out of Marcus's account balance. Every year. On the entire balance. The original contributions, and every dollar of growth those contributions have ever generated. This is the compound erosion that almost nobody explains. The fee grows with the balance. In year 1, it runs on a small number. In year 20, it runs on a much larger number. In year 35, it runs on an account built from 34 years of compounded returns, returns on those returns, and so on. The fee eats the base. It eats the growth. It eats the growth on the growth. And here's the part that really gets me about this structure. The fund doesn't have to outperform anything to collect. Active management is sold as a premium service. You pay more because you get more. Better picks, better timing, better outcomes. But decades of data consistently show that the majority of actively managed funds, after fees, do not outperform low-cost index funds over long periods. This isn't fringe research. This is mainstream financial academia. You're often paying a premium for a service that historically doesn't deliver the premium result. And the fee runs either way. 40 years of 1.2% on an ever-growing balance. Marcus ends up with approximately $1.1 million instead of $1.6, roughly $500,000, gone to fees. And the fund manager? Profitable every single year. The good years, the flat years, the crash years when Marcus's balance dropped 30% and he stayed up wondering if he needed to rethink everything. They made money. He might have lost money. The fee still ran. That's not a glitch. That's a design feature. Officially, not financial advice. Unofficially, I found this in their annual report, and they really hoped you wouldn't. So, the fix seems obvious, right? Fee is the problem. Find a cheaper fund and switch. Easy. But here's where the second door of the trap swings open. A 401k is not a brokerage account. You don't log in and search the entire investment universe. Your employer signs a contract with a plan provider. Fidelity, Principal, Vanguard, Nationwide, whoever. And that provider hands your company a specific menu of available funds. Your job is to pick from that menu. That's it. That's the full extent of your investment freedom inside a 401k. And that menu wasn't built with Marcus in mind. Large companies, the kind with 5,000 employees and an actual HR department, have serious leverage over plan providers. They can demand institutional class index funds with expense ratios as low as 0.03%, 3 cents on every $100. They have attorneys reviewing the fund lineup. They have HR teams who actually know what a basis point means. Most people don't work at those companies. Mid-sized businesses, smaller operations, the places where the 401k plan was set up by whoever had a spare afternoon a few years back, they often end up with whatever the plan provider's sales team recommended. And sales teams recommend what's profitable for the provider, not what's optimal for Marcus's retirement outcome. Those are frequently not the same thing. So Marcus might not even have access to a low-cost option. His entire fund menu might be actively managed products charging 1% or above. The cheap index fund he just learned about? It might not exist inside his specific plan. He literally cannot switch to something that isn't on the menu. But even in plans that do have a low-cost option sitting right there, and a lot of them do, here's what the behavioral data says. Study after study on 401k participation shows that well over 80% of participants never change their initial fund selection after enrolling. Defaulted in on day one, and that default runs for years, sometimes for the entire tenure at the company. Not because people are careless, because nobody told them there was a decision to make. Because the default was chosen by someone with no obligation, and sometimes a financial incentive pointing the opposite direction, to explain what that default costs over a lifetime. Inertia is a design element. The system profits from it at scale. Across millions of accounts, that inertia is worth billions. So you've got a menu you didn't choose, defaults set by someone else, a fee running on your balance every year, and a structure where the easiest path is to never look. That's the actual deadlock. But here's the third mistake, and I need to cover this because it's where people who do understand the problem still manage to make it worse. Say Marcus hears all of this. He understands the expense ratio. He gets the compound erosion. He logs in, finds the 1.2%, and feels that specific kind of frustration that comes from realizing you've been quietly worked for years. What does he do next? Most people in that moment do one of two things. They move everything to cash. Or they stop contributing entirely because the fees aren't worth it. Both of those moves cost more than the fee does. If Marcus stops contributing, he loses his employer match. And the employer match, if his company offers one, is effectively an instant, guaranteed return before the market does anything at all. If his company matches 50 cents on every dollar he puts in, that's a 50% return on those specific dollars on day one. Nothing historically available to regular investors comes close to that kind of immediate return. If he moves his balance to cash, he's still inside the account, potentially still paying account-level fees, but now the compounding engine has stopped entirely. The whole math of retirement savings runs on compound growth across time. Cash doesn't compound meaningfully. It's the equivalent of parking a car to protest the cost of gas. And stopping contributions means losing the tax benefit. Contributions to a traditional 401k reduce your taxable income right now, this year. That's real money back in your pocket today, before the market does anything. That advantage disappears the moment Marcus stops putting money in. The fee problem is real. 100%. But the answer to a fee problem is not to exit the vehicle. It's to switch to better equipment inside the same vehicle. There's one surgical move here, and it takes about 15 minutes. Tonight, not this weekend, not when you get around to it. Tonight, open your retirement account. Find every fund you currently hold. Look up the expense ratio on each one. That's legally required to be disclosed. It's always been there. It'll be on the fund's detail page or in the plan's fee disclosure document. Write the numbers down. Then look at your plan's full fund menu. Search for anything with index in the name. Total Market Index, S&P 500 Index, Bond Index. Index funds track broad market benchmarks instead of relying on active stock picking. Because of that, their costs are dramatically lower, typically between 0.03 and 0.15%. Compare what you're currently paying versus the cheapest index option your plan offers. If the difference is more than 0.5%, and for most people defaulted into actively managed funds it will be, that gap is compounding against you every year on every dollar in that account. The move: redirect future contributions to the lower-cost fund. If your plan allows you to reallocate your existing balance, and most do, move that too. 3 to 4 clicks on most plan websites. 15 minutes, once. That's the whole move. One more time with Marcus, but this time with the decision actually made. Same total contributions, same 40 years, same historical market returns. But Marcus switched to an index fund at 0.05% instead of staying in the actively managed fund at 1.2%. He ends up with approximately $1.5 million instead of $1.1 million. $400,000 stays with Marcus. Not from picking winning stocks, not from timing the market, not from some advanced strategy his professors will never put on a syllabus, because teaching this clearly doesn't benefit the institutions that built the curriculum. From reading one number and clicking a different option. Let's close the loop. You started this with your phone out. You found a number, maybe 1%, maybe more. Maybe you'd never looked at it before today. Here's what the timeline looks like when you actually make the move. Year 1, almost nothing visible. Your monthly statement looks basically the same. The difference is genuinely tiny. Year 10, $30,000 to $60,000 ahead, depending on your balance and contribution level. Year 25, over $150,000 ahead. Year 40, Marcus is looking at a retirement account that's $400,000 to $500,000 larger than the version of his life where he stayed on default and never checked. That's the extraction machine in full view. It doesn't need deception. It doesn't need fraud. It doesn't need anyone to steal from you in the traditional sense. It just needs you to stay on autopilot. To trust that the defaults were built with your outcome in mind. To assume the fine print doesn't matter. To never log in and read the one number that's been quietly working against you the entire time. Some employers set those defaults well. A lot of them don't, because the incentives pointed somewhere else entirely. This is what I mean when I say you're not behind because you failed the system. You're behind because the system was designed with someone else's interests at the center of it. But now you know what the number is. Now you know how to find it, what it actually means over 40 years, and what the move looks like. Go check it. Tonight. Don't let them play you. Listen to what they're actually saying.